and then which can lead us right into our first topic is financials and budgeting, which a lot of times on our end, because we are the ones who are putting together a budget when we present projects to people, that we learn as we go. I think every project we do, we're like, oh, here's the notes for the next one, because we're like, we need to do, we'll be like, oh, we should have budgeted more for that, or we don't necessarily need money for that particular thing. But our number one that we always are kicking ourselves for is that we should have budgeted more for just to hire an editor and have somebody come in and do that. Because a lot of the times it's just us putting it together. And I am like, let's say I'm a good assistant editor. I can do assembly cuts really well, and I can pull together my story, and I'm capable of. I know what I want it to look like. But then he has to come in and do all the detailed polish work that makes it broadcast worthy.
And if you're taking notes, that's everybody in the company that just got absorbed up into editing. So if the two of us are doing editing of a piece, or some normal years, this time of the year we have multiple pieces. So she may be cutting on this and I'm cutting on a laptop, and nobody's doing promotion, nobody's doing writing for something that's coming in February. So plus from a outside of the finances, just for the quality of your own work, if the two of you are doing the editing all the time, you're just sort of stewing in the same creative juices all the time, and you don't have sort of a fresh voice to slap you on the head. And it doesn't have to be used, and it doesn't have to be exactly, but even this past summer, we had a couple of interns, and to have somebody that's really, really not you, comes from a very, very different background, and I could point to him and say, hey, pick us out here's the rough cut, pick some music out from this site, and we'll see if it fits. And they're not songs that maybe we would have really thought of, but to bring somebody else in, it's still your project, but to bring somebody else in to give you a kick in the pants in different ways only helps.
A fresh set of eyes and a different perspective. One of our interns this summer really wants to be an editor, so that's all we had her doing. And we would just be like, here's a promotional piece we want to put together, here's all the stuff, go nuts, put it out, do whatever you want. And she would play it for us. I'm like, oh, that's really cute, I never thought about doing it that way. So ultimately it would be nice if I learned to budget better, to have an editor that we could just hire it out and ship it off with. But part of the budgeting problems that you will experience in all of your work is that you'll be like, this is how much money I need for what I want, but you're not going to always get all of that. So I think that's more something that we've learned to adapt and work with, which a lot of the times we're doing stuff that we're not getting paid for. I don't even want to think about how many hours we have worked and not gotten paid for. But they are our own projects and our passion projects. So like in the end, it is our content. So making documentaries a lot of the time is going to be your content, and a lot of the time you're not going to get paid. So for some of the stuff you have to do.
And in our particular case, and got to preface the entire day, this is our particular case, because there's a million different ways that everything can be done. But in our particular case, most of our passion projects are feeding into the whole zeitgeist of our industry, and our industry being documentaries about history with a specialization in aviation. So if we do a passion project about a particular female aviator, it is going to go out and it is going to feed into the greater world. It may ring somebody's bell going, maybe not that, but I really wanted to do a doc about this, but these people seem to do okay work. Why don't I talk to them and see if they got some ideas? So in our case, most of our passion projects, that it's not just some rando project that doesn't work towards anything. And we spool that out in our brain saying, it's not just making some hobby of ours. We know the time we're investing of ourselves into this is actually investing in the business.
Yeah, and every project we ever start, the first question we always ask, including people who approach us with projects, is what purpose does this serve, and where is it going?
Who's watching it? Where's it going? Who's watching it?
So then you know exactly how you have to tailor all of your creative, all of your budgeting, everything goes in.
The framing of your interviews, the who you're interviewing, the pace of your interviewing. So like, who is this for? And again, this comes from some of our experience that we've done. Some of the best work of our lives, of our creative lives, were for projects that people didn't really have a good idea what it was for. And the shots were great, but I don't know if the project was any good because nobody had an idea. They just said, we do cool things with these airplanes. You should cover it with us for a season. And we got to go to some crazy places. There was one point I was hanging out the side of an airplane filming P-51 Mustangs in front of Mount Rushmore. And it was for nothing. It was for no project at all. But
that was a weird client, though. That was like, because they had worked with us before in other aspects to make other documentaries, so they knew who we were in our work, but they're like, we want to make something about our organization.
We do cool things with airplanes. We should have Hemlock Films do something. And that was kind of the limit of the explanation. So we kind of dove into it, but there was not a clear path on what to do. And the project suffered. And I think they know that too, that we just didn't have a good path where the storytelling wasn't there. And at a certain point, people can only look at pretty footage of airplanes for so long before they're like, what's the point of this project? So.
Yeah, and that was more that they had certain ideals that it was a nonprofit airplane museum essentially. And they had their ideals and things that they wanted to teach. So we ended up making a five video series of web videos, essentially, as what the project ended up being. But we could have, all the stuff, everything we shot and all the interviews and stuff. We
shot a mini-series worth.
We have a lot of material that's just sitting on hard drives that never really got used. So in short, it's good to know
where you're going,
what you want to do, or you're just kind of going to be floundering, trying to figure out what that is. And with our, Adam mentioned our women aviator piece that we did about the 1929 women's air race that went from Santa Monica to Cleveland. It was the first women's cross-country air race, which Amelia was part of, among many other amazing female aviators that we don't remember because history doesn't want to remember them, or what doesn't teach us about them. They just picked Amelia. So we chose that story to tell, but we didn't want to, anything we do documentary-wise, we want to have something new to shoot. We do historical documentaries, but we don't want it just to be like an archive talking head show. So we try to come up with people who are doing something with the history present day so that we can film it. And that particular air race is still run every year. And it's changed a little, but not too much. No. But they've run it every year since 1929, except for during World War II. And then this year was canceled.
During the pandemic.
And I think one year in the 70s, there was a gas crisis. Anyways, so we that was a project that I really wanted to do because I love that story. And we happened to run into one of the racers who was on the board of the Air Race Classic. And she told us about that they still run it, which I had no idea. And I think we walked away from meeting her and then we're like, oh crap, we just committed to another documentary that was shooting in less than a year. And now we have to come up with money to pay for it. And I think our original budget was $100,000 to cover all our costs and to
be paid. We made a budget for, like, if we were doing this for clients straight up, said, all right, it's going to be about $120,000, whatever it was.
Mhm.
But
Because there was a deadline and we couldn't wait to get all that money, or raise all that money rather, we got a quarter of that. So I think we had like $25,000, which came from a foundation, which is also a lot of work to try and
we'll
get
get
money.
to that.
Yeah, that's a whole other kettle of fish. So ultimately, we made that movie for a quarter of what it should have cost.
It's primarily we covered our costs.
We covered our costs, and then everything else we just did ourselves, which was, it's a nice piece that's on PBS. It's still airing. I think
it's still running
like
on
in
PBS.
its 5th year on PBS or nationally, and
which to back up a little bit on that, when we initially cooked up the idea for that documentary, we had a relationship with a PBS station already, and thought this could be very nicely tailor-made for the PBS look, the PBS market, and their requirements for storytelling, for length and that sort of thing. So we have done pieces in the past where we have made the piece, thrown it on the table, and say, all right, let's go find somebody that might want to air it. But with the women's air race, right from the ground up, we said we're going to pitch to PBS, which affected our storytelling, affected how and where we were fundraising. And it affects when you are talking to people, because while Kara had spoken with one person with that air race, there's organizations that we had to approach and say, we'd like to do a documentary about your organization. And when we said documentary, they instantly thought we were talking about Real Housewives of Airplanes, that they thought documentary was reality, because that's the environment that we at that point were in. I think we've progressed past that a little bit. This was like in 2014, I think. Yeah, we progressed a little bit past that, but we had to talk our way in a little bit and show examples of our work, which then, having work as an example, sort of smooths the path a little bit.
So I mean, like, doing stuff that you're not getting paid for is definitely it's all worth it, because it can definitely go into your reel and your, like, it's now part of your inventory essentially. But when you're doing your budget, you always want to make sure, like, and that's kind of leading into that, is if, depending on where you're going with your project, also affects your budget. Because if you're going through PBS or Netflix or whoever, they all have a set of deliverables, and that's all going to cost something to